Before we begin this night prayer, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like this video. I don't need to open my eyes to feel the weight of what's coming. It sits just beyond the edge of sleep, pulling at the corners of my peace, reminding me that even rest isn't untouched by fear. There's a thin layer of quiet between now and tomorrow, and I can already feel how fragile it is, like a film stretched over too much pressure. I know morning will come, no matter how long I stay in the dark, and I know I'll have to meet it, even if my body stays soft and my will stays small. But for now, I ask for nothing except this: stay with me. Not to fix or explain or prepare, just be here. Just be near, not even for the whole night, just for this breath, and then the next. I think that's the only way I'll make it to the morning, not by figuring everything out before it arrives, not by steeling myself into a version of me that can handle everything, but by letting this night hold me in the only way I can bear. Slowly, gently, quietly. Not because I've found some hidden wisdom in the silence, but because you have. You seem to know what to do with silence better than I ever will. You do not rush it. You do not fear it. You let it speak, and somehow, without using words, you speak through it too. I'm not looking for comfort that wraps everything up with a bow. I've had enough of tidy answers that don't hold under pressure. I'm not hoping you'll promise that everything will be okay, because deep down I know that's not what this night is about. It's not about what happens next. It's about whether I will feel alone before it begins. And right now, I'm telling you with my whole self, I don't want to face it alone, even if it's not catastrophic, even if it's just another day of carrying things I can't name and holding my expression together while something inside me trembles. I still don't want to walk into it alone, and that's what makes the dark sacred tonight. Not because it hides the things I fear, but because it holds the space for me to admit that I'm afraid of them. This is where my fear gets to exhale without This is where I let it unfold into something softer, something you can meet without flinching. Because I don't need to be comforted by false strength anymore. I'm tired of faking peace. I'm tired of pretending I'm okay just because others think I should be. I don't want to live tomorrow as someone who never needed help. I want to live it as someone who was carried through the night, and if that's weakness, then I welcome it. So I bring you my sleepless mind. I bring you the part of me that can't stop picturing what might go wrong. Not because I want to suffer, but because my brain thinks if I rehearse the worst, maybe I'll survive it. But I don't want to live in survival mode. I want to live in presence. I want to believe that it's safe to stop scanning the horizon for danger and start looking at what's here, even if it's hard, even if it's unfinished. And I think that belief begins with something as simple as this prayer, this honest, undone, quiet thing that has no script, no answers, no climax, just a whispered request that you would sit with me, breathe near me, and remind me that my fear isn't bigger than your nearness. I don't need to be told I'm strong. I need to be shown I'm not abandoned. I don't need to be pushed into confidence. I need to be invited into peace. Not the kind that comes from pretending the pain doesn't exist, but the kind that comes from knowing it's not mine to carry alone. So I give you the night. Not just the stillness, but the storm inside it. I give you the tightness in my chest that has no words. The memories that flicker in and out, leaving behind that vague, haunting feeling of unfinished conversations and unresolved fears. I give you the version of me that feels 12 years old again, too small to fix anything, too aware of how much depends on tomorrow, too tired to know what to do next. And still, I'm here. Not because I know how to fix myself, not because I feel ready for what's coming, but because I believe you aren't waiting for me to be ready. You're here now, not on the other side of the test, not after I prove something. Here, in this moment, in this breath, in this body that feels heavier than usual, in this room that holds the echoes of all I've tried not to think about, in the silence that's both a comfort and a trigger. You are here, not because I deserve it, not because I said the right words, but because that's who you are. Then, let me stay here just a little longer, in this delicate space where everything feels more real than it did in the light, where there are no roles to play, no explanations to give, no strength to summon, just breath, and the sound of it, just ache, and the honesty of letting it surface, just you, and the strange, steady truth of your presence. Not because I earned it, but because you never needed a reason to come close. I don't even have to try to hold on to you. I think you're already holding on to me. Even when I barely know how to want that, even when I can't keep my own attention still, even when part of me tries to pull away, not because I want to leave, but because something in me still believes I'm too much to sit with. But you don't flinch. You've seen darker nights than this. You've seen deeper fears. You've sat with weeping hearts that didn't know what they were grieving. You've waited through silence that seemed endless. You've held bodies that shook without a cause they could name. So I let myself become one more child, curled up in the dark, trying not to be afraid of the morning, but needing to be met here first, because what I need is not relief from all possible suffering. What I need is the strength that comes from being seen in it. What I need is the unshakable calm of knowing that no matter what tomorrow holds, you're already holding me now. And I wish that were easier to feel. I wish my body could believe it the way I want to. But sometimes, belief comes as a quiet agreement to stay. Not to fix, not to finish, but to stay. And tonight, I stay. I stay with this uncertainty. I stay with these emotions I don't fully understand. I stay with the question marks. I stay with the disappointment I thought I'd buried. I stay with the grief I can't speed up. I stay with the edges of my own heart, where shame still tries to get in. And I tell that shame, not tonight, not now, because I am not alone in this room, in this fear, in this moment. I think you see how tired I am of hiding, of making myself palatable to others just so they'll stay, of talking like someone who has it all figured out, of dressing my fear in pretty language so I don't feel exposed. I think you see all the ways I've tried to clean myself up for company, and I think you're the one person who's not looking for any of that. You just want my presence, my breath, my honest, undone self, not for correction, but for communion. So I offer it, slowly, awkwardly, fully. The fractured pieces, the guarded tenderness, the aching loneliness that still lingers even when people are near. The part of me that wants to believe in unconditional love, but still asks, really, even me? There's something different about speaking to you in the dark. Something softer, something closer. Maybe it's because I don't have the energy to pretend. Maybe it's because my heart, stripped of distractions, is finally quiet enough to notice you. Maybe it's because in this silence, I don't have to try so hard. I don't have to be okay. I don't have to protect you from my fear. You're not afraid of it. You're not afraid of what it says about me. You're not afraid that it's still here. You just sit with it. And somehow, that makes it bearable. I don't think I realized how much I needed that until now. Someone who won't shrink away when I stop smiling. Someone who doesn't withdraw when I whisper, I'm scared. Someone who doesn't rush to fix me, but chooses to stay through the slow work of presence. Someone who doesn't measure my worth by my optimism. Someone who doesn't wait until I feel brave to draw near. Someone who simply says, I'm not leaving, and means it. So I stopped trying to make this night productive. I stopped trying to use it as a rehearsal space for courage I haven't found. I stopped trying to earn the peace I long for. And I let myself feel this moment, not for what it could become, but for what it already is. A small sanctuary, a holy hush, a breath between battles, the kind of altar, not made stone, but of surrender. This bed, this silence, this heavy heart, all of it offered, all of it yours. I know the morning will come. I know it will bring its own challenges. But for now, I don't need solutions. I need stillness. I need the kind of quiet where you meet me, not with thunder or fire, but with presence. I need to remember that you were here before the fear started whispering. You were here when I took my first breath this morning. You were here when the anxiety crept in. You were here when I smiled through the tension. You were here when no one noticed how tired I was. You were here when I started believing I had to be strong again. And you are here now. Still, always. Even if I don't feel it. Even if I can't articulate why that matters so much tonight. Even if this fear doesn't disappear by morning. Even if I wake up with the same weight, it will not be mine alone. It never was. It never will be. So I will try to sleep. Not because the fear is gone, but because you're here. Then there is this deeper layer of night, the one that opens only after the first exhaustion has softened and the mind stops trying to hold itself together. It is the part of the night where the air feels heavier, the room more silent, the body almost transparent to its own thoughts. Here the fear of the morning becomes less of a sharp object and more like a fog, everywhere, seeping into everything, yet impossible to hold. In this fog I keep trying to see ahead, to map out conversations, to predict reactions, to practice words I haven't spoken. But there's no map, only the soft pulse of my own heartbeat and the strange comfort of knowing that even if I'm lost, you're not. You're not scanning the horizon like me. You're not rehearsing. You're simply here, unhurried, not anxious about what's next, holding a stillness that's larger than my worry. It's in this place I start to realize how tired I am of being a forecaster of my own disasters, how tired I am of living tomorrow before it arrives, of carrying all its potential weight in my chest tonight. I can feel how my thoughts jump from moment to moment like an animal darting between hiding places. But each time I remember your nearness, something settles. Not everything, but enough. Enough to breathe, enough to let a little warmth back into my hands, enough to remember that my life has always been more than the worst-case scenarios I build in my head, enough to know that you have been in mornings I feared before, and that my being here tonight isn't an accident. And as I let this truth unfold, I see the small mercies of the present moment. The quiet hum of night outside the window, the weight of the blanket grounding my body, the rhythm of my breath as it evens out, a little less jagged than before. The thought that even my fear is seen fully, deeply, without judgment. It doesn't have to be silenced before you come close. It doesn't have to be cleaned up. It doesn't have to become wisdom. It just has to be honest. And honesty is all I have tonight. Honesty and a faint willingness to be held. That's when I feel the edges of shame start to peel away. The shame that says, I should have figured this out by now. The shame that says, faith means never feeling afraid. The shame that whispers, I'm weak for needing you so much. It fades when I picture you not as a judge keeping score, but as a presence keeping watch. Not pacing, not restless, not waiting for me to stand on my own, just here. The same way you've been in other nights, when I was too young to name my fears, when I was too numb to pray, when I was too proud to ask for help. Even then, you stayed. Even now, you stay. And as this thought grows, the morning begins to lose its power over me. It's still there. It's still coming. But it's no longer the whole horizon. It's one point on a larger map, and you're already beyond it. You're already ahead of me, inside of it, surrounding it. The future I dread is already held in hands that are steady. And even though my fear doesn't vanish, it becomes something I can breathe through, something I can live through, something I don't have to manage. So tonight, I let myself become small, not defeated, but small in a way that makes space for comfort, small enough to be carried, small enough to let go of the illusion that I can hold everything, small enough to be still. I let myself become the person who reaches out in the dark and doesn't pull back, the one who admits, I'm afraid, and believes that's not the end of the story, the one who lets a presence greater than fear draw near without needing to prove anything first, the one who stops trying to impress God and starts simply needing Him. And maybe that's what this night was for. Not to solve the fear, not to erase the morning, but to lead me here, to this quiet confession, this soft exhale, this moment of being known and not rejected, to remember that courage doesn't always look like charging into the unknown. Sometimes it looks like lying in the dark, whispering a prayer with trembling lips and staying open to the possibility that even here, even now, I'm not alone. Sometimes it looks like letting the night be what it is and trusting that presence is enough. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. I don't know what version of me will wake up, but I know this: the God who stays tonight will be the same in the morning. And even if my fear returns with the dawn, it will find me already held. Then I stop trying to measure time by hours and start noticing it in heartbeats. How each one feels like a quiet agreement to stay present even in the uncertainty, even in the dark, even in the spaces where I don't have language for what I feel. Something in me loosens when I stop holding the night as a countdown to the morning and instead hold it as a shelter. It doesn't matter if it's late or early. It doesn't matter how long until the alarm rings. Right now is its own kind of sacred, not because I am at peace, but because I have decided not to run from this unrest, not to avoid it, not to numb it, but to sit inside it with you and let it be seen. And that's something I don't often give myself permission to do, to let things be raw, unfinished, unresolved. I've spent years trying to get ahead of what hurts, trying to preempt disappointment by never hoping too much. I've built habits around preparedness, routines around over-functioning, self-worth around never being caught off guard. But fear was never impressed by those systems. It slips through anyway, quiet and persistent, and it always arrives in the same way. Not loud, not dramatic, but like a feeling that something's off, and I should be bracing for impact. And even though there's nothing I can point to, my body still reacts, still stiffens, still spins. But here, tonight, I let go of the performance of safety. I stop pretending I know how to prepare for the unknown. I stop layering myself in false strength. I let my soul be soft, and I let the softness be holy. I let the lack of clarity be something you are still willing to enter, because you don't wait for me to find language. You don't need the situation to be categorized, explained, diagnosed, or resolved. You meet me in the fog, not after it. You hold me in the not yet, not only in the testimony of what came after. You are not a God who waits on the other side of my process. You are the God who walks within it. And that changes the way I see this night. It stops being a pause between battles and becomes a sanctuary inside one. It stops being empty time and becomes holy ground. Not because the fear is gone, but because something in me has made peace with the truth that fear is not my fault. It is not proof that I am weak or unfaithful. It is simply a signal that I am alive, tender, open, longing, and that I care, that I feel the weight of life because I was made to live it deeply, that I sense the heaviness of mourning, not because I've failed, but because I am not numb. And maybe the fear doesn't have to be exiled. Maybe it can be held, not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a voice that needs love. So I offer it. This voice that's been speaking inside me all day, whispering what ifs and should haves. I let it say what it needs to say. I don't silence it. I don't shame it. I let it speak, and I let you hear it too, because I trust you to know the difference between a fear that needs calming and a fear that just needs to be heard. I trust you to know when to bring peace and when to simply be peace. I trust you to sit with me even when the fear doesn't make sense, even when I don't believe it should be here, even when I'm frustrated with how it keeps coming back. You're not tired of it. You're not tired of me. You're not looking at the clock, waiting for me to get it together. You're just here, still here. And I think that's what makes this night holy. Not that it's free of struggle, but that you remain inside it, unchanging. You don't shrink when I tremble. You don't leave when I'm too tired to pretend. You don't demand answers. You don't require progress. You allow presence to be enough. You remind me that being known is not the same as being fixed. And tonight, I don't need fixing. I need gentleness. I need a God who will sit beside my shaking form and say nothing at all. Just stay. A God who will not turn this into a lesson. A God who will not use this moment to teach me about faith or maturity or growth. Just a God who holds space as wide and quiet as the sky, as soft and strong as a hand resting on mine without a word. Because when I'm afraid of the morning, what I need isn't a guarantee. What I need is someone to witness the fear without amplifying it, to be near without trying to pull me out of it too fast, to say, with presence rather than pronouncement, I am not leaving. And I realize, maybe for the first time tonight, that you've already said it, not in sentences, but in the way you've waited through my silence, in the way you've stayed in the stillness, in the way you've let this moment stretch out without rushing to fill it. That is the language I trust. That is the love I need. So I rest into it. I stop trying to be someone who isn't afraid. I become someone who is afraid and held. Someone who can lie down, not because the fear is resolved, but because they are no longer hiding it. Someone who doesn't need to keep watch, because they are not alone in the night. Someone who believes that comfort doesn't always come in the form of courage. Sometimes it comes in the form of company. Silent, sacred company. Then I imagine the room itself breathing with me, as if the walls have learned a slower rhythm, a steadier pulse. The clock still moves, but I don't measure it anymore. Each second is just another chance to exhale. Somewhere inside, the dread of morning softens from a knot into a thread, still there, but not strangling me. In its place, a quiet appears, not the absence of noise, but the presence of something larger than fear, a stillness I can lean against. It doesn't ask for explanations, it doesn't demand improvement. It just receives me as I am, trembling, unpolished, but willing to stay. And I realize how rare that is, how precious it feels to be held without being hurried. For so long, my nights have been rehearsals, staging areas for every possible future. Words I might have to speak, losses I might have to endure, smiles I might have to fake. But tonight is different because I'm not running ahead. I'm not trying to be the version of me who can handle everything. I'm letting myself be the version of me who can't. And instead of shame, there is a strange tenderness in that, a soft permission to be human, to be tired, to not have the right prayer or the right plan, to whisper only one thing: stay with me, stay here, where the ache lives, stay here, where the unspoken piles up, stay here, where I stop pretending I'm enough on my own. You've been here before, in other nights. I didn't think I'd survive. You sat on the edge of my bed when I couldn't sleep. You filled the silence when my mind spun in circles. You've been the stillness that didn't vanish when the sun came up. And if you were here then, you're here now, even if I can't feel it the way I wish I could, even if fear still pulses through my chest, even if the same old thoughts try to drag me forward into worry. You're here, And that makes this night not a void, but a sanctuary, not a pause, but a shelter, not a punishment, but a place to be remade. I start to notice how my breathing deepens without my trying, how the heaviness in my limbs feels less like defeat and more like surrender, how the dark no longer feels like an enemy, but like a veil, softening the edges of everything so I can rest, how your nearness isn't an idea, but an atmosphere, quiet, patient, not imposing, not performing, just being, just staying, just holding. And as I sink into that, something in me loosens further. The belief that I must be ready to be loved, the belief that fear disqualifies me from peace, the belief that I have to face morning alone. One by one, these lies dissolve in the quiet. So I speak nothing for a while. I let the silence be prayer. I let the rise and fall of my breath say what words can't. I let the presence that's been here all along be in. And in that space, without any dramatic moment, I find a small courage blooming. Not the loud courage of conquest, but the quiet courage of being here, now, held. The kind of courage that says, I can go to sleep even though the morning is still coming, because I'm not carrying it by myself. The kind of courage that says, I don't have to solve tomorrow tonight. The kind of courage that feels like a hand slipping into mine under the covers, steady, warm, real. This is what I've been asking for without knowing. Not a plan, not a promise, but a presence. Not a shield against every pain, but a companion through it. Not a guarantee that the morning will be easy, but a certainty that I will not meet it alone. And as that certainty settles deeper, the edges of my fear blur. The night becomes a refuge instead of a countdown. My heart becomes a place you can stay instead of a place trying to earn. And I whisper, for the last time before sleep takes me, stay with me tonight, so that when the morning comes, it will find me already in your hands. Then the dark begins to feel like water instead of air, a quiet depth that carries me rather than a void that swallows me. My thoughts float instead of sink, my chest loose. The room stops being a stage for all the scenes I'm afraid of, and becomes a kind of sanctuary, stripped of all the props and roles and lights. In this sanctuary, there are no rehearsals. There is no future I have to outthink. There is only the now, unpolished, unguarded, enough. The weight of the morning, still real, still coming, hangs at the edges, but no longer presses against my ribs. And I understand, in a way that can't be explained, but only felt, that the nearness I've been asking for has been here all along, waiting for me to unclench. I've been taught to think of courage as something loud and decisive, a single act that proves my strength. But here, tonight, courage looks different. It looks like lying down while still afraid. It looks like breathing when every muscle wants to brace. It looks like not filling the silence with plans. It looks like letting the presence beside me speak in ways I can't translate, but still know. It looks like trusting that even if the fear doesn't leave, it will not be the only thing in the room. It looks like recognizing that I am held before I am brave, and that this holding is what makes bravery possible at all. As this realization unfolds, I notice how much of my life has been spent trying to earn moments like this, trying to pray perfectly, think rightly, feel strongly enough so that God would show up. But tonight shows me something truer. The showing up was never the problem. The presence was never the prize. It has always been here. The invitation is not to achieve, but to receive. And in this receiving, the night changes shape. My fear becomes a visitor instead of a master. My body, which has been a battlefield of tension all day, becomes a place of quiet again. Even the shadows on the walls stop looking like threats and start looking like patterns of soft movement, like waves on a shore. I let myself drift there, somewhere between waking and sleep, where thought becomes image and image becomes prayer. I see the morning not as a wall, but as a horizon, distant, inevitable, but no longer looming. I see my own smallness, not as weakness, but as the scale at which love meets me. I see your presence, not as a flash of rescue, but as a steady ember that glows, whether or not I notice. And I hold on to that ember, not with my hands, but with my breathing, with my willingness to remain open. It is not a technique, it is not a ritual, it is simply the truth. You are here, I am here, and the night is enough. So I whisper, not as a demand, but as a confession. Stay. Stay in the space where my heart is soft. Stay in the gaps between my thoughts. Stay in the tremble of my breath. Stay in the moment before sleep when everything feels both fragile and holy. Stay, not because I deserve it, not because I've said the right words, but because it is who you are. And as I whisper it, I feel the smallest shift, like a weight lifting off my sternum, like a window opening inside my chest. I don't know if it's peace yet. Maybe it's just relief, but even relief is enough. Even a small crack of light in the dark is enough to tell me I am not alone. And that is where I leave this part of the night, not fixed, not fearless, but accompanied. Not certain of the morning, but certain of this presence. Not free of trembling, but free of the lie that I have to tremble alone. Held in a quiet deeper than words, in a nearness that does not vanish when my eyes close. Held until the first hint of dawn, and beyond it. Then the night turns from black to a shade of deep indigo, that thin space before dawn where everything feels suspended. My body is still, but my awareness drifts like a small boat on quiet water. The edges of the room blur. Even my fear feels softer, like a voice lowered to a whisper. It is here, but no longer ruling me. It stands at the edge like a tide that doesn't quite reach my feet. And in that gap between fear and touch, something else begins to settle. Not triumph, not answers, just the sense that I am not an abandoned house, but an inhabited one. That even now, even with all my unfinishedness, there is someone walking its quiet halls. I think of all the mornings I've met afraid, of the way the sky sometimes breaks open too fast, flooding me with light before I'm ready. I think of how often I've tried to outrun that moment, cramming my nights with noise, so I wouldn't have to feel the tremor underneath. And yet, here I am, in the same fragile hour, and for the first time I'm not filling it with distractions. I'm letting it be what it is, a hinge between darkness and light, a threshold where my smallness is met with patience instead of pressure. You don't demand I be awake before the sun. You don't demand I be brave before the day. You're simply here, as present in the waiting as you will be in the moving. This realization begins to loosen the last knots. The air tastes different, cooler, but gentler. My breath deepens without conscious effort. My palms uncurl. The noise of my mind slows to a rhythm I can almost rest in. I realize I don't have to win the night for it to be holy. I don't have to arrive at dawn full of confidence for it to count. Holiness can be as simple as lying in the dark and whispering, again and again in my own way, stay. Holiness can be the courage of not numbing out, of not closing down, of choosing presence instead of escape. Holiness can be an exhausted heart that still reaches. And as I hover here, a thought flickers, small but steady. The morning will still come, but it will not be my adversary. It will be another place where you already are. The sky will lighten, the air will shift, the tasks will wait, but so will your nearness. I will not step out of this presence when I open my eyes. It will go with me, like breath, like a pulse under my skin, like a hand I can't see, but still feel. This is not wishful thinking, it is memory. You have done this before, you will do it again, you do it now. So I let myself sink further into this awareness. I let the weight of the blanket become the weight of safety. I let my heartbeat slow to the pace of trust. I let the night cradle me instead of corner me. I let the presence I've been asking for enfold the parts of me still shaking. And I whisper once more, not because I think you need reminding, but because I do. When I'm afraid of the morning, stay with me tonight. Stay until the first light. Stay until my eyes open. Stay until the fear becomes something I can carry without breaking. Stay and teach me by your staying that fear is not the end of the story, but the place where love can enter. And with that, my eyes close a little heavier. The room, the breath, the presence, they all blur into one. Nothing is solved, nothing is guaranteed, but everything is held. Then the edges of night thin even more until what's left feels like a long inhale before the first light. Everything is muted, slowed. Even my thoughts have become a low hum. There's no fight left in me, and strangely, that feels like relief instead of defeat. All day I've been bracing, clutching at control, rehearsing every possible future. Now my hands lie open on the blanket, empty. I'm not trying to bargain with the morning anymore. I'm not trying to earn sleep. I'm just here, surrendered, still afraid but not alone in the fear. It's in this quietest hour that I begin to feel what I've been asking for all along. Not a flash of rescue, but a steady companionship, a warmth beside me that doesn't come from the room. I can't see it, but my body recognizes it. A subtle steadiness, like leaning against a tree that's been standing for 100 years. The nearness is not a concept, but an atmosphere. It doesn't remove the unknown. It simply makes the unknown less crushing. And for the first time tonight, the thought of morning doesn't tighten my chest. It drifts through me like mist. I think of the words I whispered hours ago. Stay with me tonight. I realize you have, through the spirals of my mind, through the tremors in my chest, through the silence and the confessions and the unfinished prayers. You have stayed, not to scold, not to fix, not to demand, just to be here, steady as breath, patient as the dark. And that staying has begun to change me, not into someone fearless, but into someone held, into someone who can face what's ahead, because they were not left alone the night before. This is what I want to carry into the dawn, not a plan, but a presence, not a list of reassurances, but the memory of being met in the dark, not a false confidence, but a real trust that I am not walking into the morning abandoned. If the tasks are heavy, if the conversations are hard, if the unknown stretches out, then let this night be the proof that I do not have to face them with empty hands. Let this quiet become a seed of courage, small but alive, ready to unfold when the sun rises. So, I'll lie here a little longer, eyes half closed, and let gratitude mingle with fatigue. Gratitude for the breath still moving through me. Gratitude for the stillness that grew around my fear. Gratitude for a God who doesn't wait for me to be ready, but meets me exactly where I am. And as the first faint line of light slips under the curtain, I whisper one last prayer before sleep pulls me under. When I wake, let me wake already in your presence. When the morning finds me, let it find me held. And with that, my body softens into sleep, not because everything is solved, but because everything, even my unsolved fear, is no longer mine to hold alone. Then the night has almost dissolved, and what remains is a kind of trembling quiet that feels like the inside of a held breath. The darkness is lighter now, but still soft enough to wrap around me. It doesn't feel like a threat anymore. It feels like a blanket stretched across a sky that has waited with me, listened with me, breathed with me. My heart is slower. My body feels heavier in the best way. Not burdened, but grounded. The fear of the morning hasn't vanished, but it no longer sits on my chest. It sits at the edge of the bed like a shadow, and between us, There is a space filled with something warmer, steadier, more real than dread. In this space, I begin to notice how much has shifted without noise or announcement. How the voice inside me that kept running through worst-case scenarios is quiet now. How the words I couldn't find have turned into a kind of unspoken prayer. How your nearness has seeped into me like water into dry ground. Slow, patient, invisible at first, but changing the soil from within. I am not a finished story. I am not a problem solved. I am a heart that has been sat with, seen, accompanied, and in that accompaniment, the morning loses some of its sting. I think of how many times I've met a sunrise already exhausted, already braced, already certain I would be alone in what it held. Tonight, this strange, tender night has become a different kind of threshold. Not an escape from tomorrow, but a quiet arrival into presence. The realization that even in fear, even in confusion, even in unfinishedness, I can be accompanied. That this companionship is not an idea, but an actuality, a weight of peace against my ribs, a warmth at my back, a pulse that keeps time with mine. So, before sleep finally overtakes me, I let a different prayer form on my lips. Not a plea, not a bargain, not a plan, just a small statement of trust. You've stayed, you're still staying, and if you're here now, you'll be there then. When my eyes open, when my feet touch the floor, when my hands reach for the day, your presence will not evaporate with the night. It will travel with me like breath, like heartbeat, like a quiet strength under the skin. And that thought, fragile but true, is enough to make the darkness feel less like an ending and more like a beginning. I close my eyes. The room fades. The sky behind my lids is still dark, but it no longer frightens me. I don't try to hold on to the moment. I let it hold me. I let the warmth, the nearness, the patience stay as it always has. And in the final seconds before sleep, I whisper one last time, not out of desperation, but out of quiet gratitude, stay with me tonight, and when the morning comes, let it find me already in your arms. Then the last folds of night become almost transparent, like gauze between me and a world that is beginning to glow. The sky outside is still a deep gray blue, but there is a softness under it, a hint of light that is not yet morning, but no longer dark. In this fragile hour, I no longer feel like a person bracing for impact. I feel like a soul being readied, gently, for whatever will come. My body is heavier than before, but it is the heaviness of release, not of dread. My mind is quieter, as though the noise has been dissolved rather than silenced. There is no rush to name it. There is only the slow recognition that I am not alone and never was. In that recognition, I stop trying to hold a posture. I let my shoulders slump into the mattress. I let my breath deepen without counting. I let my heart speak without forming words. All night, I have been whispering, "Stay with me tonight," and somewhere between the whisper and the silence, I have begun to believe the awe. The fear of the morning is still present, but now it feels like a passenger rather than a captor. It can sit beside me, but it cannot drive. It does not own my breath. It does not own my future. It does not own this moment of nearness that has been built in the dark. I think of how many nights I have gone through like this, thinking I was whispering into nothing, thinking the silence was proof of absence. And yet, every time, in some quiet, unexplainable way, I have been held, not always spared from pain, but always accompanied, not always given answers, but always given presence. And in this presence, something in me keeps learning how to rest, keeps learning how to let go of the endless rehearsals, keeps learning that faith can look like falling asleep without fixing everything first. The sky outside my window is still dim, but I can sense dawn waiting behind it, like a hand behind a curtain. Soon, the birds will start. Soon the noise will return. Soon, I will have to get up, speak, choose, act. But for now, in this final pocket of night, I choose to stay here a little longer, to let the quiet soak in, to let the companionship deepen into my bones, to let this memory of being met in the dark become a small anchor I can carry into the light, not a shield against everything hard, but a seed of courage planted in the soil of my surrender. So, before sleep takes me completely, I whisper one more prayer, almost without sound. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being here before I asked. Thank you for not treating my fear as a flaw, but as a place to draw near. And when the morning opens, let this nearness be the first thing I feel. Let it be the ground beneath my feet before I stand. Let it be the breath in my lungs before I speak. Let it be the quiet in my heart before the world begins again. And with that, I let go. Not of hope, but of grasping. Not of life, but of grasping. Not of life, but of control. Not of fear, but of its power. I drift towards sleep with the simplest truth wrapped around me like a blanket. I am not alone. I was not alone. I will not be alone. Whatever the morning brings, it will not find me abandoned. It will find me already held. Then the darkness outside has become almost silver, the last stretch before dawn when everything holds its breath. It is the hour when the world seems weightless, when even the street outside is quiet, and it feels as if time itself has slowed to a soft pulse. I lie there in the stillness and realize that the prayer I began hours ago has turned into something deeper than words. It's no longer a request tumbling out of me. It has become a rhythm under my ribs, a gentle heartbeat that keeps saying, you're here, without sound. My fear of the morning is still somewhere in the room, but it has shrunk into the corner like a shadow at twilight, and between us there is only presence, steady, unhurried, holding. In this fragile space, I sense what I couldn't feel before, that I have not been preparing myself for morning. I have been being prepared by nearness. The dread that wrapped itself around me has loosened, not because I solved it, but because it has been witnessed. My body, which spent the day braced, now feels like it's melting into the mattress. My jaw unclenches. My eyes sting, but not from panic, from a relief too deep to name. There's no grand revelation, no blinding light, just a low, deep certainty that even in this smallest, most tired version of me, I am not too heavy to hold. I begin to understand that this is what staying means. Not a dramatic rescue, but a long, steady accompaniment through the night until the first light arrives. Not an answer to every question, but a presence that makes the questions bearable. Not the removal of the morning's weight, but a quiet sharing of it. And as that understanding roots itself, my breathing changes. Each exhale feels like laying another stone down. Each inhale like taking in something steadier than my own strength. I realize I have been invited to stop performing courage and start receiving it. The curtain at the window is a little lighter now. Soon the birds will begin. Soon the day will open. But I no longer feel as if it's a cliff I must climb. It feels like a path already walked, a space already occupied by the one who stayed with me tonight. I do not have to burst into the morning with force. I can step into it from a place of being held. That alone changes everything. It means my fear doesn't have to be conquered before dawn. It means my weakness doesn't disqualify me from walking forward. It means my first breath of morning can be an echo of this moment, this night, this quiet in which I have been accompanied. So I whisper one last time, not as a plea, but as a soft agreement with reality. You stayed. You're staying still. You will stay when I open my eyes. Let the memory of this nearness thread itself through my waking. Let it be the first thing my feet touch when they hit the floor. Let it be the ground under my trembling. Let it be the voice under the noise. Let it be the calm under the rush. Let it be the small, steady light that rises with the sun and travels with me into every room. And as that whisper fades, I let my body sink fully into rest. I stop rehearsing. I stop bracing. I stop bracing. I stop braziering. I let the night and the presence hold me until the morning comes, not as a threat, but as another place where love will meet me. Whatever the day holds, it will not find me abandoned. It will find me already held. Then the horizon is no longer a thought, but a faint glow, a slow widening of pale light along the edge of the sky. The room is still, but different now. Air softer, edges clearer, silence less heavy. It is not yet morning, but it is no longer night, and in that between space my heart begins to understand something it could only feel in the dark, that fear does not disappear by force, it dissolves when it is not left alone. Hours ago, my breath was shallow and my mind a whirlpool. Now there is a depth to each inhale, an ease to each exhale, as if presence has worked its way into my muscles and bones without asking for permission. I no longer feel as if I am waiting to be rescued. I feel as if I have been accompanied. The nearness I begged for at the beginning of the night did not arrive like thunder, but seeped in like warmth. It stayed while I confessed. It stayed while I panicked. It stayed while I had no words left, and because it stayed, the night changed. It stopped being a void I had to endure and became a quiet room where I was met. The fear of the morning still exists, but it is now a smaller shape against a wider backdrop of steady love. I think of the version of me who started this prayer, clenched jaw, restless mind, scanning ahead for danger. That person is still here, but softened. Not braver in the usual sense, but different, less guarded, less ashamed of being afraid, more willing to believe that God meets me exactly there. This is the quiet courage I will carry into dawn, not a mask of strength, but a memory of being seen, not a plan, but a presence, not a speech, but a steadying hand. The first bird starts its call outside, a single note that sounds like a thread pulling through cloth. Soon there will be more, and soon the day will open fully. But before it does, I stay here a little longer. I trace this stillness with my breath, letting it soak into me like light into paper. I whisper again, not out of desperation now, but out of gratitude. You stayed. You're still here, and you will go with me. Let the echo of this night follow me into every room. Let it remind me, when fear rises again, that I have been here before, and I was not alone. And as the pale light grows, I let go of the need to hold anything else. My eyes close heavier, my body softer, my heart steadier. I do not wake to a solved life, but I will wake to a remembered presence. Whatever the morning holds, it will find me already held. Then the sky outside is a muted pearl, the thinnest veil before sunrise, and the world feels like it's holding its breath with me. I am still lying here, eyes closed, but awake enough to feel the shift. What was heavy now feels quiet. What was urgent now feels distant. It's as if the night itself has been a long, slow exhale, and my body has learned it too. All the words I've poured out have settled into a single truth that sits in my chest like a low, steady glow. I am not alone, not in the night, not in the waiting, not in the crossing from fear to light. It's strange how subtle the change is. Nothing outside me has been fixed. No angel appeared with instructions for tomorrow. No miracle erased what I dread. But something inside has softened, as though presence has been moving like water through stone, carving out a quiet place where trust can sit. My heart no longer clenches at the thought of morning. It still trembles, but it trembles in the company of a steady hand. The presence I begged for hasn't been dramatic. It has been faithful. It has been here, breath after breath, through every wave of panic, every silence between words, every small surrender. And because it stayed, I can stay. Because it's stayed, I can now let the morning come without feeling abandoned. I think of the dawn now as an open doorway rather than a cliff. I don't have to leap. I can walk. I don't have to be flawless. I can be held. I don't have to muster a brave face before I rise. I can rise still soft, still human, still with a tremor in my voice, and still know I am not stepping out of this presence. It will not evaporate with the darkness. It will move with me like a quiet current under everything. So before sleep finally pulls me down into its deepest part, I offer one last small prayer. Not as a demand, but as a seed. Let this nearness be the ground beneath my first steps. Let the memory of this night be a lamp inside me when the day begins. Let me carry this soft courage, the kind born in the dark, the kind born of being met, into every room I enter. Let it teach me that even when I am afraid of what's ahead, I can rest, I can breathe, I can be held. And with that, my body relaxes completely. The silver of the sky slides toward pale gold. My eyes close, not to escape, but to trust. I drift towards sleep with the simplest truth wrapped around me like a blanket. I was afraid, and I was not left alone. The morning will come, and it will find me already in your hands. Then the light at the edge of the window is no longer a rumor, but a promise. It slips across the floorboards in long, pale streaks, turning everything in the room soft and almost weightless. I am still lying where I began, but I am not the same as when the night first folded around me. All the hours of whispering and waiting have distilled into something simple and steady, a quiet belonging that does not depend on the darkness, a nearness that does not dissolve when the world turns. The fear of morning hasn't been erased. It has been met, held, gentled, and because it has been met, it no longer rules me. I take one slow breath and realize it's the first in a long time that feels like breathing into space instead of into a cage. The blanket on my body feels like an embrace instead of armor. My thoughts, which once spun like a wheel, are now drifting like leaves on still water. Nothing about tomorrow is solved, but nothing about tonight has been wasted. In the quietest way, presence has been working on me, teaching my bones and breath that safety is not the absence of danger, but the company of love. Teaching my heart that courage is not a mask of strength, but a memory of being held. As the first bird begins its song, I understand why I prayed, "Stay with me tonight." It wasn't to keep the morning away. It was to remember, in the middle of dread, that I am not left alone. And here is the answer, not as a voice, but as a reality. You have stayed. You are still staying. You will be there when my eyes open, fully. The same presence that sat with me through the hours of darkness will walk with me into the light, step by step, breath by breath. I do not have to manufacture strength before I rise. I only have to carry the memory of this nearness into the day like a quiet ember. So, in this last moment, before sleep takes me or dawn fully arrives, I whisper once more, but not in desperation anymore, in gratitude. Thank you for staying. Thank you for making this night a sanctuary instead of a void. Thank you that I do not have to go into the morning empty-handed. Let this quiet companionship be my first ground, my first breath, my first thought. Let it stay with me like a low, steady light, even when the day becomes loud. Let it remind me that fear may come, but it does not get the last word. And with that, I close my eyes and finally release the night. Not because everything is fixed, but because everything, even my unfinished fear, is no longer mine to hold alone. The sky brightens, the world begins again, and I drift into rest already cradled by the presence that will meet me on the other side of sleep. Then sleep does not arrive like a fall, but like a deep surrender, like a curtain slowly closing on a long, quiet play. The light at the edge of the window glows warmer now, still delicate but certain. If I were to open my eyes fully, I would see the full outlines of the world returning, the corners of the room, the folds in the blanket, the quiet details of ordinary life. But I don't need to. I stay here, eyes closed, not out of fear anymore, but because this moment has become holy. This fragile stillness between sleep and waking, between dread and trust, between the end of one night and the beginning of another day, it's a sanctuary I didn't expect to find. And in this sanctuary, I do not need words. I am not narrating my pain anymore. I'm not listing what I'm afraid of. I'm not asking for signs or strategies. I'm simply letting myself rest in the memory of being accompanied. It is not loud, it is not bright, but it is real. And perhaps that's what I needed more than anything. Not for the morning to be less frightening, but for my soul to be less alone in the night. And it hasn't been. Not for one moment. You were here while I trembled. You were here while I hesitated to speak. You were here in the silence between every sentence I couldn't finish. This is what presence means to me now. Not comfort in the form of instant peace, but comfort in the form of someone who doesn't leave. Someone who does not require explanation. Someone who doesn't rush me forward or drag me into confidence I don't have. Someone who lets me be entirely what I am, right here, without the pressure to transform. And that is a kind of healing I didn't know I could receive. The healing of being met before being fixed. The healing of being known while still afraid. I lie here, barely moving, and for the first time I feel what trust can feel like in the body. Not a leap, not a sprint, but a long, slow exhale that reaches all the way into my spine. It tells my nervous system, you're not in danger now, you can let go. You don't need to be ready yet. The world is not asking anything from you in this moment. The morning hasn't begun. The noise hasn't started. For this breath, and maybe the next, you are safe. Not because everything is certain, but because you are not alone. That's a hard sentence to believe sometimes. I'm not alone. Not because I doubt you, but because I have lived so many moments of silence, so many long waits, so many mornings that felt like survival. The aloneness has been familiar, but this night has been something different. Not because the pain was less, I still felt it. Not because the fear disappeared, it still touched everything. But because this time I didn't sit in it alone. I sat with you even when I wasn't sure you were listening. I sat with you and you did not get up and leave when I said nothing. You didn't require me to make progress before staying. And now, as the light warms and the first sounds of day stir beyond these walls, I feel myself returning to my breath not as a lifeline, but as a gift. The simple rhythm of being alive. The pulse of a heart that has not given up, the weight of a body that carried me through the long ache of night and is still here, still breathing, still soft, still sacred. And you, still near. Maybe that's all I need to carry into the day. Not certainty, not clarity, not power, just this memory, this proof that even when I could not fix anything, I was not left behind. I was not overlooked. I was not too complicated to sit with. You stayed. That fact alone is enough to change how I walk into the light. Then the stillness becomes not a pause, but a presence in itself. Not the absence of noise, but the shape of something tender that remains when everything else grows quiet. I lie here, no longer counting the hours before morning, no longer bracing for the moment the world expects something from me again. I am not afraid in the same way anymore. The dread has not disappeared, but it has been moved from the center. What sits there now is something weightless, like trust before it knows it's trust, like water stilling itself after a long storm. I don't need this moment to be more than it is. I don't need a promise of how today will go. I don't need strength to surge into my limbs like fire. I only need to remember what has already happened. I asked for you to stay, and you did, even in silence. Even when I had nothing left to say, even when the fear had no shape, you stayed. And that staying, that quiet, unremarkable nearness, has become more healing than any answer I could have received, because answers shift, circumstances turn, but presence does not need to be rewritten. It remains, whether or not I understand it. It does not compete with fear. It doesn't shout over it. It holds me underneath it. And I realize now that this is what has slowly shifted the weight in me. Not that my fear is solved, but that it's no longer carrying me. I am no longer its vessel. I am a place where presence has taken root, quiet and unmoved, not loud enough for others to notice, but deep enough that I can feel it in my bones. And so I let the morning come as it is. I do not try to outrun it. I do not try to rise before it. I let it arrive slowly, like the rest of this night has taught me, not as a threat, but as a continuation. What I have known here in the dark does not vanish with the sun. You are not a god of silence only. You are not a comfort that disappears when the alarm goes off. You are not a hand that withdraws once the prayer ends. You are the God who stays, who stayed when I was folded in fear, who stays now as the fear becomes just one part of a much larger story. I think of the way the light has changed, everything in the room without me even noticing, how the shadows have softened, how the ceiling above me looks less distant, how the walls no longer feel like they're closing in. All of it happened while I was lying still, while I was not performing, not producing, not achieving, only breathing, only letting myself be met. That is what grace looks like in the dark, not a fixing, not a lesson, but a slow unfurling in the quiet, too gradual to control, too holy to rush. So I stop rushing. I stop pushing myself toward the end of this night as if morning is a test. I stop asking what I will be able to carry today and start trusting that what was carried for me tonight is already enough. I don't know what will meet me when I rise, but I know what met me here. And if that presence has not left, then I will not rise empty. I will not wake up alone. I will not face the morning unheld. Then I realize there's nothing left to perform, nothing to prove, not to chew, not to myself, not to the day ahead. The stillness that has been growing through the night is not passive. It is a quiet resistance against all the demands I usually place on myself before I even rise. In this stillness, I am not the person who needs to have a plan. I am not the voice that needs to explain. I am not the force that keeps everything together. I am only a soul, still breathing, still here, being gently carried across the thinnest place between fear and peace, and that's enough. The morning still waits. Its light presses faintly through the curtain, barely touching the floor, but I do not flinch at it. I do not brace for it, because I am no longer waiting for it to make me strong. The strength has already been given, not in the form of certainty or strategy, but in the form of nearness. I do not rise today because I have summoned the will to overcome. I rise because I have been accompanied through the night, and that accompaniment has become the ground under my feet before they ever touch the floor. I think now of how many nights I've spent afraid, not just of what would come, but of what wouldn't, of being left alone in the stretch of hours where no one else was awake to bear witness to what I carried, of being forgotten by the one I was trying to reach. But this night has left its mark on me, not in spectacular ways, but in the subtle way that quiet wraps around a weary body and says, I never left. I was here before you called. I remained when you stopped speaking. I waited without impatience. I listened when you couldn't find words. I stayed. That staying is no longer a theory I try to believe. It has become something embodied, something I know in the deep animal parts of myself, in the way my shoulders finally released, in the way my jaw softened, in the way my breath stopped catching before it reached the bottom of my lungs. I carry that knowing now, not in my mind, but in my skin, in my spine, in the muscles that no longer feel like they're holding 1,000 invisible tasks. I carry it in the space behind my ribs, where panic used to live, and even if I forget it later, in the middle of the noise, in the face of the unknown, the night will still have happened. The presence will still have stayed. So I don't try to define this as healing. I don't try to call this moment a transformation. I let it be what it is, a soft passage through darkness with someone beside me, a long silence that was not empty, a fear that was not ridiculed, a soul that was not ignored, and that alone is more sacred than any clarity I could have chased. There is no brilliance here, no dramatic shift, no sudden assurance. There is only breath, presence, stillness, and the slow unwinding of dread. I lie here knowing that the day will begin soon, that I will have to speak again, that I will be seen again, that I will make choices again. But all of that will begin in a body that has been met, in a heart that has been heard, in a soul that was not rushed to recover, in a spirit that was told, you don't need to be ready, you only need to be real.